Capthulu here with another episode of Capthulu. So, this episode is titled "Is Slavery Wrong?" And I think the question is dumb, but I also at the same time think that most people don't really think through their presumptions on it. They really don't. So, ground rules, of course, for anything here is logic and scientifically backed statements apply. No unfounded statements allowed, basically. Not for any debate, right? So if life has value, which was discussed prior, it logically follows that abusing life of any sort is wrong. Slavery is a form of abuse, therefore slavery is wrong. And we can tell slavery is abuse for what it does to the person psychologically, to what it does physically, to what it does mentally and emotionally. We understand this, right? We have psychology. We know now that this is really damaging, that it's inhumane, that it's wrong, which is great. However, we haven't followed that to its logical conclusion. For example, I believe that there is a sliding scale, like like a light slider, a light dimmer, on slavery, or on any subject of abuse, right? You can have someone that brutally rapes and murders someone versus someone that just says nasty things to you, right? Even within the realm of rape, there's worse kinds, and then there's more gentle kinds of assault. We find them both to be assault. We find them both to be rape, and we find them both to be wrong and abhorrent. What makes we don't just end it with the worst kind of rape and say, oh, only this kind is wrong. Right? We don't do that. Because quite frankly, it's mentally ill to suggest that. And I'm mentally ill, so that's okay to say. So, I'm going to define the dimmer switch on slavery here. Hard slavery is the word I'll use for the classical kind of slavery, the one everyone remembers so fondly, when African Americans experienced forced labor, no pay. I'll put the middle of the dimmer switch to moderate slavery as a form for forced labor with payment. So you're still forcing labor, but you're compensating them. It's still wrong, still slavery, but it's less aggressive, right? Soft slavery I'll define as labor mixed with coercion. So you're still coercing someone to do something, so you're compensating them. You're not forcing them in the strictest sense of the word, but you're coercing them to do it. It's still slavery, just a softer form. Now, a lot of people are like, yeah, hard slavery is wrong, but they don't seem to realize that there are intermediate and low types as well, and those kinds can be contested. I mean, they shouldn't be contested, but they are contested. So, for example, and I understand why people would see that, right? Because they're given compensation, and they have presumably rights, even though their rights are being violated. The working conditions must be safe and humane for soft slaves, for example, to give the appearance of rights while denying them. But as I argued, I argued that in the article, is it not still abuse? Are there not levels of abuse? Like, for example, physical assault. You can beat someone to death, or you could just punch them in the face, or you could slap them in the face. Those are different levels of physical assault, but we don't say that the less harmful form isn't physical assault. Of course it is. It literally is in the definition, right? It's still physical assault. Slavery is slavery, no matter what level it's at. So what if, instead of being enslaved by, for example, the government, for example, talking about doctors, right? What if there was a mob that formed that said the doctors had to work for them if they were to be doctors? They would be paid, they would have, quote, rights and humane working conditions, but they had to work for them or they could not be doctors. We would be upset at that mob. We would say that that's horrible, right? That's a miscarriage of justice. That's horrendous. But yet, when the government does it, we say it's okay. we need to be consistent with condemning people, right? Later on, I'll argue for consistency between us and God, and now I'm arguing for the consistency between us, the average person, and government. The government is just a bunch of people. They're just a group of people, right? So what's wrong for us should be wrong for them. Abuse is abuse. Slavery is still slavery, even if it's a softer version. I think that this is actually absolutely appalling, right? But now some might say that soft slavery is necessary to prevent human rights abuses like racism. So in this instance, the argument is that the government must compel person X not to be racist with his business. And the black person is being devalued and degraded in the form of racism. Therefore, person X must be devalued and degraded in the form of soft slavery to prevent it. First off, F that doctor, he's a dick. Right? And people will see that, and he's not going to go very far with his business. I think it's safe to say that he'll go down pretty quickly and pretty damn hard, and nobody's going to want to touch the man. No one likes a racist. The person would be an outcast, and no one wanted to do business with him. But the two wrongs make a right. So this man is being racist. So do we take away self-ownership from him, and create a coercive environment so that he doesn't commit this crime, or his perceived crime, so he doesn't commit this act of wrongthink, right? And I would say no, we can't do the wrong thing to prevent this guy from doing the wrong thing. Let's just do the right thing and let people react normally, right? So what is slavery? Slavery is a denial of self-ownership. If you don't own yourself, by default, someone else is claiming ownership of you. So I'm going to get really clear here. Self-ownership is ownership itself. What is ownership, right? Ownership is a set of rights to something. So it's that you can do whatever you want with this property besides, invading someone else's or denying someone else's rights to their property. That's basically it. So we're talking about yourself in terms of property here. So even if you think, and what is self, right? Self is mind and body. That's what it is. Mind, body. So you have possession. You get to do whatever you want with yourself, your mind and body, because if you don't, someone else is laying claim to you, right? If you don't own yourself, who owns you? By default, whatever the answer is slavery. And someone else is always claiming ownership, right? If you're not exerting ownership over yourself, that means someone else is exerting ownership over you. They're claiming you, whether that be the government or whether that be other people. They're saying that you do not have the right to do what you please with yourself, and that is, by definition, slavery, right? Now, there are exceptions, of course. As I said before, you cannot deny the claim to another person's property, which means you can't, hurt another person. You can't deny them of their rights, right? And that makes sense. But and some people say, well, the concept of self is too poorly defined to actually have a good argument. I don't think so. Some would say, it's mind and body. It's very clear, very, very defined. What you do with your mind and what you do with your body is your business, nobody else's. Some would say that the idea of ownership is too vague, and I don't think so. Some would say that you're arguing in circles using a system of rights to validate a system of rights, but I'm not, because this system, someone is by default claiming ownership of you. Whoever it is, whether it be yourself or someone else, someone is claiming ownership of you. Someone's doing with you as they please. Someone is either you're doing what you please with yourself, or someone else is doing what they please with you, or they're putting restrictions on it. And that is ownership. Ownership is something that's natural, and and people gravitate towards it. People are going to claim it. So someone actively, whether you like it or not, they're claiming you, or you're claiming yourself. So that's self-ownership. And the absence of such is slavery in any form. And it's wrong. And government shouldn't do it. And that's pretty much it. It's really, really simple. So, and then there's this whole downward spiral too, right? So, this whole idea, of people being allowed to be racist. I know it's right with some people. So let's take this well-meaning idea to its logical conclusion. No business can be bigoted. That's awesome. So, but where does it end? What constitutes bigotry and who gets to decide? Now we'll have businesses and people walking on eggshells so as not to be perceived as bigoted. Now every little thing that could be taken the wrong way, and business could be taken to court over nothing. Eventually bigoted could be taken to mean causing offense to a minority, and then things get worse. Minorities now have a financial incentive due to money gained by lawsuit to find offense. So now everything is offensive. And it doesn't end in business. Now people who work with businesses are being watched closely on social media. One wrong sentence, no matter the intent, could end a career because businesses can't afford to associate with bigots. Now everyone with the wrong opinion can lose their job, as certain opinions could be perceived as offensive to a minority. And it doesn't stop at social media. Why would it? It's already gone this far. Now the private offline lives of citizens are being roped in. Anything that could be offensive to a minority offline can be reported to social media, where careers are killed over just about anything. The minority has now become a tyrannical ruling class. This should be chilling. This should be horrifying. And this is the reality we live in today. This is what's... We're heading down a road of Orwellian censorship because of and minority tyranny because of a well-intentioned idea. It's because we chose a series of lesser evils for the greater good instead of choosing what's consistent and what's right. Now, some might say we would only need to word the anti-discrimination law properly. These people haven't learned the lesson. Laws against negative rights historically have always led to oppression and always will. That's because the law was oppressive to begin with. And what's a little more oppression to end oppression? It's a lesser evil, it's the greater good, yada yada, we can convince people, right? So, anyway, I made my case. Abuse is abuse. Slavery is slavery. You need to own yourself. Self-ownership is absolutely vital, it's important, and it needs to be recognized by society and the community. And we need to realize that the government is just a group of people. It is not a god with special rights. It is not a religion with special rights. I argue that gods don't later on have special rights either, but my point is it's not that either. It's not... Government isn't God, right? You can't say that the government cannot do any wrong, because government is just people, fallible people, a tiny minority of people that is expected to be perfect. Thing is, people aren't perfect. I'm not perfect. I know I'm not. Maybe you are, and that's fascinating if you are. I would say that you're a bit egotistical. Perhaps you need to examine your life. My point is, we have a small set of fallible human beings, and we somehow expect them to be perfect. We expect them to have the right set of rules, to exert the right amount of influence at all times, even though historically we've seen that this can't happen. If human beings are fallible, why do we have a small select people that are expected to restrain themselves? Instead, we should be the ones restraining them. That's the point of a constitution. That's the point of a republic, is to restrain people, is to restrain the government, because the government is just a group of people, and the more power you have, the more you're tempted to abuse it. And I would argue that a lot of people are. And maybe they don't realize it. I'm not saying all politicians are wrong. I'm saying that a lot of them don't seem to understand what they're advocating. And then there are the ones that are pure evil. But, I can't say who is who, so I'm not going to. I'm just going to say, let's treat the government as what it is, a group of people. Let's understand what slavery for what it is, lack of self-ownership, and let's end it. I think this is vital for, I say this every episode, but I think this is vital for the progress of society. Anyway, that's all. I have been copy struck twice by Shrink the State for saying their outro. So I'm just going to say, camp out.